Hi everyone, welcome back to the third episode of my Music by the Month recap series. What this is every month of this year I've been trying to produce and release a song in the hope to have a full album by the end of the year. And alongside the release of each song, I've been doing this behind the scenes series where I just give my thoughts and insights into sort of what was going on when I was making it. And it is currently March 31st and the third song has been released, so let's go have a look into the project. So for each one of the songs I make, I tend to try to have some sort of narrative or just an emotion or a feeling that I want to tell through the music. And for this one I sort of had the ideas of a very sort of nostalgic sound, and this is a remake of a song I made a couple of years ago, so it sort of fits in with that theme a little bit as well. And to tell that through this, I sort of wanted to have the setting of maybe someone finding like an old VHS tape of recordings of maybe a band performing, and this is the song that they would be performing, and it sort of just shows how the sort of feeling of them going through and watching all these old videos. So that's sort of what I wanted to go with this one, and I sort of told that through various sound effects and just effects in the music and things like that as well. So this is a remake of a song that I made a few years ago, as I said before, and I wanted to sort of change it up a bit so it's sort of not just a complete copy. And sort of how I did that is the original one had lots of guitar sounds and stuff, which I do acknowledge later on, but I wanted to start off with a very electronic synth based sound. So I used a lot of these very soft pads, very smooth bass, to sort of have that different vibe at the start compared to the original song. And I'll play a little bit of it here as well. Just to start, it'll have a bit of the sound effect, but I'll just play it anyway. So it's sort of a lot sort of softer and a calmer vibe, but I did want that to start off quite slow and then to build up to something bigger later, which is sort of why I chose to do it like that. The melody is a little bit more complicated for sort of a main melody than what I would usually do. I usually try to keep it a little bit more simple, but I sort of wanted it to contrast the main groove a bit, which was sort of very mellow, so I needed that little bit of contrast to keep the interest going compared to the past songs where the groove was a little bit more interesting and then the melody stayed simple. I've sort of flipped it around for this one, and I'll just play it here. So it sort of has it moves around a lot, and it sort of doesn't feel fully complete as well, which is sort of ties in with sort of the remembering and nostalgic feel that I wanted with this, where it was more of a memory than direct perception of the music. So for the main start section that we just went over sort of acted as sort of a foundation and sort of more of an introduction to the feeling. So for this next bit, I wanted to work on that and work to build up the story a bit and build up the energy by adding in different effects and melodies and things like that, which sort of add to the energy into the environment. I did that. There was sort of this effect I did with a lot of the automation here, where the last note of the melody from the first half of the section sort of builds up quite quickly and sort of is used as sort of a riser and to transition to to this next bit. And I'll just play that very quickly here. So it's sort of a very quick motion there, just sort of help transition between the first very simple section to where there's a lot more elements. Because right after this I add in another melody. It's more of a just sort of something to play in the background to help build the energy, and there's some percussion as well with some hi-hats, and then later on with a kick and a snare drum as well. Yeah, I'll just have a look into the melody here and just to see what I did with it. It's sort of just going down these 3 notes in the scale, sort of alternating, but then you can see there's these big notes up here that sort of fade out and drag on, and they're at a different point in each bar, which sort of adds to just sort of add a little bit of interest in there, and sort of just surprise the listener a bit, so it's not all just the same. I'll just make this the pattern here. I've actually, just to know, I've used 2 different synths in this one, where these notes here are panned in the right ear and the other notes are panned in the left ear, and it sort of has this call and response effect just in the stereo space. I'll just play it. So that's the melody there, and it sort of also aids in just the build up a little bit, that counter melody that pans in the left and right ear for the next section where it builds up even more. I'll play it as well. So you can hear how it sort of slowly develops over time as the song goes on, and I think sort of just that very simple melody in the background aids a lot in building up the energy to the main part of this section. So to have a broader look at this subsection here, although I think that the background melody is probably one of the most fundamental parts, I did bring back the melody from the start, but to make it not seem so monotonous as it goes through, I've actually made it go up and down the scale. I've actually added in the cutoff filter that sort of opens up a bit more to let in some higher frequencies to sort of contrast it from the start. As well as that, I've added in these drums up here, or extended upon the hi-hats, as an added a kick and a snare drum, and added in to sort of build up the energy a little bit more. So I've done something on the snare drum where I've sort of added this in this fake delay effect at the end, where I'll just play the pattern just so you can hear, but it sort of just adds a little bit of contrast as it goes through, so it's not all the same, and sort of concludes each measure a little bit nicer. So just that little fake delay as the velocity cuts out. It's quite a good effect without having to add in another plugin. Just a simpler thing. And towards the end of the section here, I sort of wanted to just sort of have this big finish. So I've sort of gone up with these risers. You can see all the automation, all these filters. They slowly open up more and more, adding in more and more of the higher frequencies, sort of making it sound louder and just a fuller sound as it goes on, right before where all of these effects here happen. And I'll just play the ending bit here just so you can get an idea of how it sounds. Yeah, so at this point, all of the elements come together and they sort of have these big hits, and then it sort of fades out back into those sort of old VHS tape sound effects, which sort of is used as a transition point between each section. So at this point in the song, the first section's over, and I needed a way to sort of transition it. And just sort of to fit with the narrative, I wanted this person to just sort of be just sort of looking through the memories that are sort of captured in this tape. So I added in the sounds of the machine running to make it sound like they're speeding through the tape, just so to hear all of what's on there. What I've done is I've actually sort of taken a sample from the original version of the song, and I've sort of cut it and sped it up a bit to sound like it's been on the tape, and that's what sort of they're rushing through. I've also, because it is the original one of the song, it sort of fits in with the throwback, nostalgic sort of theme of this piece, which I sort of wanted to have as well, which I guess you'd get if you knew the original song. Yeah, I'll just play the transition just so that you get an idea of it. And it sort of slows down and cuts off at the end, just to sort of add to the suspense a bit of sort of where it's going, right before the second section. Alright, so the second section, and I think the main section of the song, it starts off very abruptly after sort of the sound effects there. There's like a click of the, like a button on the machine being pressed, sort of pressing play on, which is sort of meant to be like pressing play on the recording, and then it cuts straight into these big energetic stabs, sort of carrying on from where the last section cut off, and then it goes straight into this very big sounding sort of rock groove almost, very abruptly. So I'll just play the start of it very quickly here just to get an idea. So it's a very different sound from the first section, and I wanted to I did that to sort of add in variety in the song, but I chose this specific sounding groove sort of genre to match the original song with sort of the very guitar rock drums sounding groove. That's also why I chose the organ sound for the melody, to sort of also mimic the original song as well, because that's the sound I used on there, and I sort of think that combination sort of adds a lot to the character of it. It's quite, there's not much to say for this bit other than sort of what was said before. It's just the same melody that was repeated at the start. I wanted to sort of use it as a motif throughout the whole piece to connect the sections together. And then it just sort of carries on with the groove until at this point over here is where it begins to change a little bit, and the melody does change. I've sort of arranged a bit, some synths cut out, the volume sort of change around a little bit, just add variety. But then when it all comes back here, and the melody picks up again, I've added in these stabs here, which, looking at the original song, was one of the main characteristics of it, so I had to sort of include that in here somehow, and I'll just play that bit here. Yeah, so listening to the original recording next to that, it's a little bit different in terms of the rhythm, but I purposely changed that to not just have a complete direct copy of it, just to sort of have a little bit of originality, but the main idea of just the big stabs is still there. I've also added them here at the end of the section as well, which is also how the original song ended as well, just to sort of keep those connections between it. And yeah, that's the end of the second section. A lot of it is just sort of groove, like the bass of the groove and the drums and stuff, which is fairly simple, rather than actual narrative, which is spread out a lot more. Thinking of the narrative with the composition, I sort of, because it was the theme of the narrative is based a lot around memories and nostalgia, a lot of the time when you're sort of recalling something, it just comes to you in sort of different chunks, and then your brain sort of just merges it together, hence sort of the theme of 3 different sections being put together as sort of one memory with these moments in between to connect them and to sort of reflect a little bit. So that's sort of my idea of the arrangement of it, why I did that. And to come to the last section here, in terms of the narrative, I sort of imagined the character stepping away from the video and just having sort of a moment of reflection, and I guess they would sit down at the piano and and then they'd sort of play sort of what they were feeling. That's sort of how I saw the narrative going. I'll just play it just to get an idea so you can get an idea of how it sounds. So it's a very, very soft, human-sounding, very fragile emotion going on there, which I wanted to capture as the emotion of this character at the moment. The way I sort of did that was, you can see with the automation, I've sort of had this very forced vibrato effect with the volume sort of shaking up and down in all the elements, which sort of makes it feel very fragile, as well as sort of offbeat, sort of free time sound of it here. I know it's sort of arranged in 4/4, but it's not. The chords don't really line up with each bar. It's sort of a very free sounding section. And thinking of the piano melody as sort of the character speaking, I guess, it sort of has this bit of interest at the end where the melody on the piano doesn't resolve, it sort of leaves it open, and the resolution comes with the chords in the background, sort of separate from what the character's sort of directly feeling. Yeah, so that's the song for March. I've been posting updates on my Instagram and TikTok every single day, sort of showing where the current song is, and when this is out, I would have started on April already. And yeah, so if you want to keep up to date with those, make sure to go watch those. And yeah, I guess I will be back next month, where, as quoted last time, I have not posted since.